Good viewer, you are watching Exert Us. This is because Exert Us makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Exert Us for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Exert Us, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Exert Us. Your friends will come to like Exert Us, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Exert Us. See, that was easy.
The following video contains content some viewers might find disturbing. The views and opinions expressed here are not facts and are nothing more than entertainment. The views and opinions are not facts and do not represent the views and opinions of Zertis or our channel, and do not necessarily represent or reflect the views of the guests, YouTube, Google, mainstream media, society, or civilization at large, or anybody. Viewer discretion is advised.
Do you ever wonder about the world? I was just looking at this article from Marie St. Clair on the terrifying rise of alt-right female influencers, and that reminded me of my good
Andreas, I
friend
can't hear you.
Tiffany.
So
I'm just kidding. Tiffany's actually more like a libertarian,
Mike's not working that day.
because that's where she belongs. She's not right or left. She's she's not a centrist either. I'd say she's pretty heterodox. I'm glad to have you, Tiffany. It's been a while. We used to work at Tim Cast together, and you've done a lot of things. Tell us a little about yourself.
It has been a while. Thank you so much for the invite, Andreas. I've been working on various online businesses and things like that, like just trying to make it work, hawking merchandise like everyone else. I have written one book, and I am finishing my second one. And this one is the second one that I'm working on.
Nice.
It is not available for sale yet, as I need to finish a couple editing things and formatting issues that it had.
Better botany than bot. So you can purchase plants and plant them is the idea. Like helps people get started on planting things.
Yeah, I would argue that my book is just as much a self-help book as it is a hydroponic-focused book. Because at least with my own process, I've discovered that one of the biggest hurdles is just starting. And especially when you get like hitches and like your seeds don't sprout. This will be my third time trying to grow edamame. Stuff is really stubborn. But I really want to do it. I really want to be independent. And I want to teach people to have healthy leafy herbs in their own kitchens.
That's awesome. Some people are telling me my microphone is terrible. Let me know if it's working better now. I've been having some technical difficulties. Nachiketa is with us from India. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. I'll be here just for a short amount of time, but hello, everybody. Nachiketa here.
Nachiketa has a really great
Andreas.
He has a really great channel, and I know I told him, like, hey, jump in here, but he's about to do his own show, so I'm glad you had a second to be here, but everyone should check out Nachiketa's channel. We did a great thing on Dune, and I hope that you're all, when you're done with this, hop over there and check it out. American Time Machine popped in. Well done, American Time Machine, and Aiden. Wow, I can't believe I did this. I got them all together. Cool. Aiden with his beautiful hair.
Sorry to interrupt, but like, am I the only person that can't hear Andreas?
Hey, you might be. Is everyone else able to hear me?
Yeah. You're audible. Just fine.
Okay, go Woo. You might need
I can't hear for some reason.
You might need to fix your headphone.
What the hell? Hold on, I'll rejoin the stream.
Fix your audio.
See if that fixes anything.
But also Andrew Vega is here, my comrade in arms, in case we ever have to bring down the system. So we're all ready for that too.
Oh, nice to meet you, Andrew. As a matter of fact, I'm glad that you're here too. Just the other day, I was reflecting on the fact that the libertarian right, has to emotionally accept, and we all know how slow emotions are to update. The rebel right may need to accept the fact that anti-Trump small government people may be our best allies for getting a reformed system.
Right.
I can finally.
Yeah, there's that Texan who's running. It legally changed his name to literally anybody else. Anyone catch wind of that? It was a pretty mainstream story.
I did hear about that. Who changed his name?
Some dude in Texas, I'm sure. There we go.
Oh,
he legally changed his name to literally anybody else.
Yes.
That's a great trick, actually, right? Because people might write that. People might write literally anybody else.
There was a town in Wisconsin, I think, that hired a mayor. Or it's a dog as its mayor, which is great.
Here for it.
I don't want to be a QAnon guy, but I'm still holding out hopes for Trump because his campaign promise back in 2016 was releasing the 29 pages of the Saudi investigation, that was admitted from 9/11. And like, so with Saudi Arabia switching their alliance to BRICS instead of with the United States, like it has been for the longest time, and they're also dropping the petrodollar for the yuan, which is last time an OPEC nation did that was Iraq, and we went to war with them. So I don't know. This whole 29 pages stuff is kind of spicy because the classified papers that he had in Mar-a-Lago was the 29 pages. Come to find out, which is why the FBI seized it. So that's the thing, which is why I'm holding out for Trump, and like I also think on the conspiracy side of things that RFK Jr. is a vote splitter. Because he's going out, rah-rah.
I can at least agree with you on that. I don't know how I don't want to hold out for any human or reptilian candidate, but at the end of the day, it does feel kind of interesting Yeah, I mean, the fact that everyone's supposed to hate Trump, I'll give you that. That's kind of an interesting one. And then RFK, everyone's supposed to ignore him. Sorry,
and like his whole shtick is about like the ethnic bioweapons in Russia, which has been known since what, like 2009. Like what was it? Russia banned the sampling of DNA sometime around that time period because the KGB got wind that the NATO was developing ethnic bioweapons, which has been confirmed proof with the 2015 MERS outbreak, because the United States Army had a lab leak in South Korea, which is what started the 2015 MERS outbreak. And like every Korean citizen knows this because this was national news at one point, but it was buried like anywhere else. Which was the predecessor to COVID, which is how the Wuhan lab leak or whatever connection.
Yeah, there's something, okay, and I'd also give you that. There's something interesting about how during the American 2016 to 2020 period, a lot of things that we expected to happen in the United States did not happen. I think a lot of people will accuse the QAnoners of being, they really were hopeful, optimistic, romantic, but it isn't often considered how much changed in the world abroad, right? I mean, during the Trump period, we think about North Korea, and you think about the election and the arrest of the president of South Korea, and being everyone in Daewoo and Samsung that were forced. There was people that committed ritual suicide, because of the dishonor that they brought in Korea, right?
Yeah,
at the time of
that's, and also the what was it, suicide of the Korean president
pre-Squid Games.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird shit going on in Korea, especially during that time period. And also, what also surprised me was what no one really brings up, is that the fact that Donald Trump officially ended the Korean War, and nobody gives him credit for that. Like, there's a whole White House commemoration page about it and all. And I was. Yeah, this was during my enlistment, which is how like I was made aware of this, because it was like the 4th week of basic training. A sergeant comes out of nowhere, tells us, "Hey, the Korean War is officially over," and fucking just leaves.
I go like this. Can I block out the word, and then maybe like YouTube will let me keep this page up? I don't know.
Maybe, but yeah, maybe. RT was like one of the only Western publications that brought this up. But like, this was national news in Korea, that the U.S. Army had a. But yeah, this is the MERS outbreak in Korea. The WHO webpage literally says novel coronavirus, bro, and then nobody saw this shit coming.
So it seems to me like, actually Tiffany brought this point up, like the left and the right, really there's constituents that are the elite, and the left and the right there's an authoritarian wing of both that are a part of one bird. And at the end of the day, they're working together, right? Because you're creating this system that's allowing for an international response. And so that's something that's above any particular state. So any state can't have a democratic or self-representative maneuver in that design. So it ends up being only the authoritarians, either the left or the right, but they're both coming up with this heterodox solution, which that is what we end up with. We end up with something that's extremely left and extremely right instead of at the same time, rather than a system that is, designed sustainably by the people. Ooh, sorry, Gumwoo's got a good one here. Ethnic bioweapon.
Yeah, I want to show people like this stuff is very real. It's not like science fiction or nothing. It's if you look at the history and the development of ethnic bioweapons, especially if you get to Israel and Russia, dude, it's
an invasion invader.
No, but just keep going down.
Yeah, but also Heinlein, man, you can't avoid it. But yeah, keep going. Yeah, genetic weapons.
Went until you get like 2008, around the Obama presidency was when things started hyping up, and like then the 2010s.
2007, it reported the Russian government banned all exports of human biosamples.
Yep. And then all of a sudden, 23andMe, whatnot came out, dude. Remember, like how 23andMe was like a Clinton partner company collecting the biosamples from everybody. Same thing with Ancestry.com. Yeah, this is all like the fucking. It's all I saw at my guy.
In 2008, the U.S. government held a congressional committee, genetics and other human modification technologies, sensible international regulation, or a new kind of arms race, during which it was discussed how we can anticipate a world where rogue and even not so rogue states and non-state actors attempt to manipulate human genetics in ways that will horrify us, quote unquote.
And it's called high fructose corn syrup.
I mean, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, the idea of a bioweapon, though, you can figure out that there are certain, like, let's say some people are allergic to corn or to soy or something like that. Well, that's a genetic thing a lot of the time. And there's a genetic, there's a chemical response, but there's a genetic, you could create one could create an adenoviral which focused on specific genetics which were only found in specific populations. There might be very rare and unique genetics that you're like, oh, only these million people or 40 million people are affected by, and we can hit that target. And anyone who doesn't have this particular adenoviral won't be able to withstand that, right? These are the biochemical adenoviral weapons they talked about in 2008 or 2005, or even in Heinlein's Pan-Asian weapon in this.
So what I've been seeing throughout the Cham boards is that like people have been noticing that like people of the type B blood allele whatever are the ones that are specifically targeted by any coronavirus. But I remember back in like the mid 2000s, a friend of mine from Australia, he was part of the some university research group at the University of Sydney, and we lightly touched on the topic of the possibility of an ethnic bioweapon and whatnot, because he works on like the genetic development of plants and all this sort of stuff. And then like we noticed that like Asians, especially type B blood people, the allergic to alcohol genetic is the thing that like that's widely known throughout WHO circles, a lot of these health organizations. Especially if you tie in the fact that like the whole Tartaria tangent that we've been discussing, that how the Freemasons and the Jesuits for the longest time have been trying to suppress the Tartar people. An ethnic bioweapon would be the ultimate final solution, specifically if they do target that one gene within Asians that'll make them allergic to alcohol. Very easily exploitable, that differentiates from the wanted populations from the unwanted.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
Lactose intolerant.
Yeah, that too.
Those gluten intolerance.
Gluten intolerance is a big one too. But also we've invented a lot of these refined sugars and refined foods. So it's like, okay, you find a population, you find out what their diet is, you make them move to a new place and give them a new diet. And there will be epigenetic consequences. That's the first thing that we're seeing in the cappuccino economy. But beyond that, the idea that there are specific, diseases that affect people differently, this is something we've moved away from talking about because it's just uncomfortable. No one wants to admit that there are differences, like sickle cell anemia for a lot of Africans. It makes it possible for them to avoid malaria, but it also makes it difficult for them to have access to certain kinds of medicines which are designed Eurocentrically, right? And this is true for everybody. There's high blood pressure. There's certain population. The idea that African Americans life expectancy is lower than the American retirement age, there's no way this is not manufactured.
Yeah, it's this whole like remember during Occupy Wall Street, everyone's like was up in arms about like was it systematic oppression and all that stuff. They have the narrative right to some extent, but they don't see the full picture is the issue. But it ties into zoning laws and ties into like cultural diet expectations and whatnot, and all the job application occupations there that these certain racial groups are pressured into becoming, stuff like that. Like what certain jobs like impact their different cortisol levels, etc. Whatever. Who's more likely to smoke? All that is accounted for with zoning laws, especially if you like look into the like a lottery ticket conspiracy of who they target, how it's like a tax for the poor, stuff like that. Systematic oppression definitely does exist, but it's more sort of like a class warfare type rather than a racial issue.
I would also just like to point out this one thing about, it being a Russian thing, is that there is no distinct genetic thing about Slavic people that would really differentiate it with, the Anglo-Saxon, Gaelic, whatever, mestizo race most Americans are. And just to prove this is that like a lot of the original Anglo-Saxons, like, 1,000 years ago, when they got kicked out of, Britain during the Norman invasion, they left and they settled in Crimea, and they eventually settled a lot in Ukraine and in Russia. So it may be only a few thousand people, but that there's consequences to that. So
I did this in one of my first videos. You talk about the repeatable experiment of the caste system. And what it is that the indigenous people are placed at the bottom of any caste system, and the elite are placed above the invading people, right? The invading people being people that were brought in from other conquered lands, right? So you bring one land that you've conquered to conquer another, put the people of the indigenous at the very base of that, and then as you know, the people that did all this, they end up at the top without having to do any of the fighting, right? The peninsulars versus the indigenous, which is why the indigenous are lower than the Africans, and the mulattoes are higher than the African. You know,
they never said that. Like that's more something That's an Anglo-Saxon graph.
You could do that, but like you could think about the Persians. You could think about the caste system in India. It's the same thing in India. The untouchables are the indigenous. The Aryans are not the indigenous, right? And the same thing you could say with the Germanic people. Like to be a royal in England, you have to be descendant from someone not from England, right? That's kind of true. So yeah, I give you that it's a European thing, but it's also true of the Sephardic coast. You don't come from the original land. I think there's a lot of this idea that you're the native people are always at the lowest in the totem of the colonial state that's produced.
I have a question. Is that why the DEI kind of propaganda right now is like so anti-white people?
I think there's a bunch of like places where it's different. So like in places in the West and in the Midwest and things where there has been a Eurocentric population, it's felt more. But if you go to a place like in Texas at the border where most people are Mexican, and it's this border that's been artificially built above the line of what was Mexico, then the way they're looking at it's very differently because they have European, white, Hispanic Mexicans versus indigenous Mexicans. And they're not looking at it like about Mexican per se, you know, because they're different varieties. But if you go to the Midwest where the kind of Mexican that you're interacting with is somebody who's had to deal with states by state of oppression to get to a place where they can be working at a, you know, Home Depot, fixing a deck or something like that. That's a very different kind of Mexican than your, you know, European, like, what's his name? Louis C.K. Like Louis C.K. is a Mexican, you know? So the idea of states and race are really confused right now. Nachiketa, you're from California. Where are you from? You're from America, right?
I was born in Korea, but I grew up in Wisconsin.
You grew up in Wisconsin, right? Yeah, and you live in India. Yeah. So it's like it's the idea of these states, like it's a lot more complicated than it used to be, and particularly with Mexico, which was a very European country up until James Polk conquered it, right? So in 1844, we went to Mexico and said, "Stop it." But they had a European French kingdom run by Maximilian. It was a Masonic kingdom, right? It was an empire, the Mexican Empire that was forming, and it was very French and it was very blue-eyed. And you can go to Louisiana and Texas, and you can still find Franco-Mexican populations, which were, you know, attacked, killed, and had to basically hide their identity.
Really, attacked, killed in Louisiana.
Oh God, yeah. Louisiana was brutal.
How many murders? How many, like, where?
I'm talking about entire towns. Entire towns have been wiped out. This last summer, this January, I went to Louisiana, and I went to a number of former Franco-Maximilian settlements from people that had been part of Franco-Mexico and had gone into Louisiana because they found French being spoken there by the Cajuns. Unfortunately, the French being spoken was 2 centuries later. So it was completely different French, and they were not welcomed by the Spanish. And the Germanic people in Louisiana had already built up Baptist communities, and they were not interested in these new Catholic communities forming. There's a lot of reasons why it was a religious thing, less than a racial thing.
I don't know. Yeah, but
Andrew had a thing you want to say, unless you got a point. Andrew had a thing he was going to say. You were shaking your head earlier about the not being a racial thing.
Oh, I mean, I was just thinking about the aliens. You know, how they sort of are following the same structure, and how the DNA targeting the ethnic bioweapons could be sort of like a test ground for them targeting, you know, people who are descendant from these kinds of aliens versus these kinds. And, just going real off the deep end. But the
No, that's
conversation
fair, though,
is
even from the
mutated.
level of there's multiple kinds of hominids, and we're all there's a gene flow between different kinds of hominids, but that even goes to that idea that there are there efforts being made to target ethnicities? Well, we've seen that from Nestle. We've seen in South America indigenous populations removed for the benefit of corporations. Why is it so hard to imagine that's happening everywhere in the United States? And yeah, I think it's true to say that there is a push against. I just don't think it's completely. This is a funny thing. Like, a lot of people say, "Oh, there's just a push against white people and the white male," but I'm not convinced it's just that, because I see that same push against a lot of people. Anybody who's trying to be their own group anymore, instead of being a part of a homogenized state, is looked at with peculiarity, right?
Well, occasionally you also see a post on TikTok from a Black American, and the Black Americans are pointing out, like, they don't have abortion clinics at the border, but they do in Black neighborhoods specifically.
Right.
And I just can't believe that's still socially tolerated. Maybe we'll eventually get to the point where it's not, but it's like, it's pretty in their face who they're trying to eliminate. It's kind of disgusting.
Well, yeah.
Say it.
So with this is just a repeat of Manifest Destiny. So initially, for the longest time, due to imperial, like European ruling classes, like white people were usually in the favor of all these. But then, ever since the emergence of the Frankfurt School and the ideologies that stem from that, and the practices that stem from whatever they came up with, it's becoming more so like a cosmopolitan push. Like, I'm not saying like any specific races that are favored anymore, rather just like a ruthless cosmopolitan nation. It's just we're seeing a repeat.
It's a bunch of actors, like Hollywood actors, wanting there to be this big giant mix, and they're the star of everything.
Right.
It's like Obama's daughters. Both of them, they're definitely Black American, but they only hang out with white men. It's like, ooh, I'm the star. Ooh, look who I'm fucking. Ooh, they don't really want to be around people like themselves. It's all about me. And rootless cosmopolitanism that is definitely everything about that. In that Wikipedia is probably true. Without the whatever ADL bias.
Right.
I have another question. So I have personal bias because I was actually given up for adoption. So that's why I'm pro-life. But could my words of noticing that Black Americans are noticing the abortion clinics be construed as this cosmopolitanism?
For me, it's pathological.
What's pathological?
I mean, okay. You are not the type of person that anybody would ever consider, it's great. I'm pro-life, but there are, and this is actually a big problem that they even talk about. I believe it's Jared Taylor and Steve Saylor will even bring this up, is that there's been for the longest time they promoted abortion, especially for, Planned Parenthood for Black people, because they felt that if somehow they had less kids, there may be a better chance for them to get a higher IQ. So there's a little bit less violence.
You know where that started? That started in New York at the Maimonides University and Hospital, because the Hasidic Jews under Rabbi, what's his name? I forget, but there was a rabbi. And so at the time, a lot of the Jews had thought, wow, we had our population decimated. Literally, we should probably be producing as many kids as possible. But then there were women who were going through the hospital who were dying. They're like, you cannot have another child and survive it. And they're wondering, well, but did I just die? Because I should be producing more children. And they started coming up with this idea out of Israel. Like, they talked to all the rabbis, like, look, quality of life is important. And we can't just be focusing on having as many babies as possible. Maybe you should focus on having better opportunities for your kids. And that spread from the University of Maimonides through Doctors Without Borders, right? So the doctors were just practicing what they'd been taught.
Speaking of Planned Parenthood, this is a great segment to bring up the Jaff memo. I've been harping on this for the longest time, but people forget this stuff exists. But this on the archive, you're better off just Google imaging the Jaff memo. Here, I got you. Because sideways is hard to read. Here, just check the private chat again. But yeah, this is literally what's going on, and this has been a thing since what 1967, I want to say, or earlier than that. Fucking everything that's written on here is right now.
I mean, this goes back to the Bolshevik anti-ableism, because the Bolsheviks were against the family nucleus because they thought it was ableism, and they thought the idea of a state providing everything that the family did would mean that either the family would have to provide something more, or that the family would no longer be responsible or obligated, and it would make it possible for citizens to work harder. Encourage sexuality, educate the family. Wait, say it again.
I said people work pretty hard when they got mouths to feed. So
right.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, what is the thought here? I mean, okay, we talked about that earlier today too. The idea of there was a point when life was more valuable. You can look at after the plague, and people were thinking about the value of life, and people were moving into bigger homes because there was less population. Versus the enclosure movement of agriculture and the sustainability of the city and grosser mercantilism and this introduction of the fetishism of urbanism, where you say, we can sacrifice people. And then the people even say, well, I can sacrifice for the next generation. And that is a new logic that builds up, and it kind of is dying now, but it started to emerge in the 17th century and the 18th century.
So go ahead.
Oh, nothing. Just industrialization provides opportunities for what do you call it? Horizontal expansion, I guess you could say. And without industrialization, you can't have a metropolis. But yeah, I mean, doesn't it all comes back to resources and how they're managed, and how the management of those resources benefits the people who control access to them. So as far as like Planned Parenthood and eugenics and all of that, it seems less to do with not having the resources to provide, and more to do with ethno cleansing,
right? But that ties into like this false sense of scarcity that we have. Like, when we do have the means to provide opportunities and resources to everybody, we just we rather not, because in order to benefit for the I'd say the expenses, the spending habits of like the upper classes. So we have to constantly sacrifice our resources for their overconsumption.
So is that the DEI?
They're not even consuming; they're just hoarding.
You're right.
That's the DEI thing there, because we're told that it's like the American middle class that's the consumer, when it's really the corporations and the elite that are consuming 99% of the wealth. Like, what is the deal with the DEI? Because I think Tiffany brings up an interesting point. Like, Andrew, do you think that there's something against white people, or is this an extension of what's always been going on against the Vietnamese and the Filipinos and everyone?
I mean, it's all just, identity politics and ways to.
Filipinos used to have 13 kids. White people used to have 13 kids.
Oh yeah,
Filipinos
it was. Yeah,
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, like you initially throughout the imperial era, when the whites were initially the top ruling class, the favored races, you see this throughout all throughout political statements, especially in American history, post Manifest Destiny. Even Abraham Lincoln himself said during the whole Emancipation era that like he would rather I want to bring that quote up, but he mentions that his position of being like being white should be the more superior position.
And isn't that also an issue with that, because like we are all the colors mixed together? Pink Floyd, not white Floyd, and it's the Babylon.
I don't want to exacerbate anti-Semitic tropes or whatnot, but we're definitely seeing this identity politics stuff being puppeteered by the Shabbat organization specifically. The Committee of 300, everyone's boogeymaning about. Yeah, they're the ones ever since the 60s, the Black Liberation Movement. There's literally a book called Black Politics, Jewish Power.
The FBI even investigated all this stuff too.
Yeah. This is all in the FBI.
And they leaked it too. They
This is
purposely
becoming
let it out.
this is becoming FOIA. This is becoming FOIA as well. Like I know they cut it out, but you can still access it in some cases. And then so like so because of, like I said, the I guess Shabbat taking over, with capitalist realism sitting in place, on top of postmodernism becoming, like, ever since the 60s liberation of black and Jewish people, the contemporary movement took over, in terms of aesthetics and the arts. And then ever since then, they've been puppeteering identity politics to where it's becoming now more so anti-white. They're leveraging like all this the white guilt of the imperial era and leveraging that
But
against.
nobody else, like, we don't even do it that way anymore. Like everything
I mean,
else, you'd say this person's not Asian, this person's not Oriental, like they're not from the Orient, like this person is from a country they're from the Philippines, or they're from Vietnam, or from China, or from Laos. We've broken that mold. Whereas this 19th century trope of white, which was created because Irish people were treated worse than African Americans, and they're like, well, but we really need the Irish vote.
Right.
We need the Irish vote. Irish people were paid a quarter of the price that an African American was paid, which was a quarter of the price that a German or a Nordic person was paid.
You can ask sociologists this. Like a lot of black culture actually comes from the Irish immigrants. Like the way they speak,
music has to do with Irish people being forced to do rounds while they're doing labor in coal mines.
There's propaganda posters everywhere equating black Irish people to blacks. It's absurd.
I mean, the Irish culture thing is interesting because the idea of the creation of the white culture, before this point, you're not referring to people as white. And all of a sudden this becomes a trope, which spreads to Europe. And we looked at Roman statues the other day, colored Roman statues, because in Rome, everything was like technicolor.
Statues of color.
Right.
Yeah, colored people. Statues of colored people. Exactly. No, but this is
like, I'm just
it's not exactly what I meant, but I like it.
If more people knew about actual history like we do, the identity politics falls in on itself. But like all this stuff is propagated for the benefit of destabilizing the social fabric of America.
Is there a benefit though? Because the social fabric of America is this manifest.
They're trying to hold American industrial production and output so they can elevate China. This has been a thing, which is why Soros has been trying to push for a carbon tax for the longest time, especially in this country. They succeeded in Australia and every other nation in the Anglosphere, especially England, besides America, were the last holdout.
Can you imagine what better it would be if the world was
WEF, you know how like the WEF 2030 reset, they put out that video saying America will no longer be the world's reigning superpower. This is their whole plan, is to lower America's industrial output, which is why we have been outsourcing everything to China since Nixon.
That and boomers are just lazy.
Yes.
Lazy, gross people.
All right, that's the other question. Is it that white people are actually failing the economy because they're lazy, and so it makes more sense to bring in whomever works hard? So you bring in Indians, Mexicans, whomever is willing to fill that gap in the economy.
They're not filling the economy. They want to make it seem like that through CNN and whatnot. Like in the whole opioid crisis exacerbating whatever, right? But it's the white people are actually the backbone of the truckers are the backbone of America's economy. Our supply network is the only thing keeping this country together, as we've seen with COVID. But it's always like bad people, white people bad. We need to bring in more immigrants, but like we're seeing with the impact of the refugee crisis in Europe and Australia now. We're getting statistics from it. The industrial output index, the productivity rates, is fucking plummeting ever since the introduction of new migrants. Constantly, it's completely breaking.
It's doing worse than it was doing before.
Yes. It's stagnating the economy.
And it's very funny is that you have this very Jewish group of people, the Shabbat group, who's always been, ever since they got into America, and there's actually a lot of the Western or the traditional Jews that lived in America pre-Civil War. They were very against these people coming in.
Yes,
they were adamantly against them coming in. They're like,
which is why they fought for the South. They fought for the Confederacy. Yeah.
They called them the K word. Well, they just created the K word for them. That was something they said. don't let them in. But once they were let in, they immediately put in all these immigration for everyone in the globe. The whole we're a nation of different people, that whole thing. That was them, them changing what was on the Statue of Liberty. That was them.
Yeah, which is how we got the first communist scare, the first Red Scare. It was in the 1910s, 1920s.
They're talking about Shabbatism. Just warning you. Good to see you.
And it's like, they definitely see a lot of white people as a competitive group that destroy or something. It's very bizarre.
Yes,
also they want to create there to be friction.
The boycott of German goods.
Well, you are specifically talking about a unique group. The Shabbat Ludovich group isn't like everybody. It's one specific. It's kind of be like calling everybody the Jehovah's Witness who are Christian.
Wait, so did they write the priories? Sorry, I'm riffing right now.
I like it. I don't know. It could be like the thing about the Shabbat though. They get a bad rap. Like, first off, they are a group that are trying to protect their own community in a country which was full of different communities, right? You've got people that wanted them dead to begin with. And yeah, like organized crime is a weird term. I don't like it because organized crime gives too much credit to police and corrupts government. Corrupt government's far worse than organized crime. Organized crime is just a community that is self-determinate, that is watching out for itself. This is the problem with calling. I mean, the mafia ran Louisiana.
But look, when you have other Orthodox organizations like the Nutra Chi being adamantly against these groups to the extent they're showing up on the ADL as an anti-Semitic hate group, despite being literally Orthodox Jewish themselves.
This is hard to argue.
There's genuinely a problem.
Jewish Defense League, they call them out on being just kind of weird people.
Yeah, no, they literally have anti-Semitism labeled under the Nutra Chi, even though they're literally an Orthodox Jewish organization. Like, this is completely head over heels and mental gymnastics.
I'm just saying though, it's like anywhere you go, you're gonna find a group of people that are self-determinate. Here's Colorado, Midwest. You got a group, Little Caesar Roma. You guys know about the Italian connection with the pasta cans full of heroin? Like, a lot of things went on in the French Connection. I'm just saying.
But they're not hell bent on. They're not hell bent on they're not the ones like puppeteering identity politics against the American.
The Italian Defamation League tried their best. They controlled the production of the Godfather film. They tried to assassinate Desi Arnaz for his Italian American sitcom series. Frank Sinatra wanted him dead. I mean, just there's a lot of effort that went into the Italian American rhetoric, which was very quickly. You can see how it transitioned from Golden Girls.
Actually, Italian Americans care about America. The Shabbat organization only cares about profit margins, which is what we see with BlackRock.
And it's like,
I think building an organization that can support itself makes sense, though. Also, Shabbat can't be effective if it's not able to.
I'm all for a right of self-determination and all, right? Every American should have the right to self-preserve or whatever, make their own.
Especially if you got a cool hat like that.
Right, but then again, dude, if your path to pursuit of happiness interferes with other people's right to live, that's a problem.
Yeah, that definitely is, and I think with a lot of these kind of weird, Shabbat groups, they're failing in that they are realizing they screwed up big time.
Mm-hmm.
Them getting Ukraine or supporting Ukraine during this Russia-Ukraine thing, Israel sent all of its shells to there. Then Hamas and a lot of the Middle East attacked Israel right then. There's not much sympathy in America because now you have put so much money into third world liberation, that type of thing, that not many white Americans care about Israel anymore. Not enough to do anything. So it's like, and the most hard-boiled Republican people that feel sympathy for Israel, they're just like, well, you guys didn't really help us when we needed help. You kind of were being a bully when I grew up.
Bosnia.
And it's like, and what makes it even worse is that they've been funding, the whole thing of we're different religions, but we're going to still treat each other the same. Well, they gave a lot of military equipment to Azerbaijan to go against Armenia. Mel Gibson points this out, that this is like, okay, this is very counter, you can't do that. That's, if you're supposed to be kind of loyal, there is no European country that would have sold any weapons to Azerbaijan, even though Azerbaijan had the right to evict Armenia. It was pretty clear, cut in stone, that Armenia needed to give or do something more to ease the conflict over that contested territory.
Meta Egg looks offended. I want to hear what he's thinking.
You're muted, by the way.
I think I'm staying out of this, man. as soon as he said Mel Gibson, I was like, I'm out.
I'm sorry.
I heard he's doing a sequel.
I'm sorry.
Do you guys know who? Okay, do you guys know what nationality or what country Mel Gibson grew up in? Where?
Australia.
No, incorrect. He is American. He was
born in America, but he grew up in Australia since he was 7 or 9, right?
Right, because his dad actually was a long-reigning Jeopardy champion.
That's why I thought he was a pre-Vatican II Catholic. Tell me your story. I like it better.
So yeah, his dad won Jeopardy, and like I got him the heck out of the country as the way. I mean, this has been a few years since I researched it, but that's how I understood. And
dang, bro, that's amazing. 68 World War II veteran, 1968 Jeopardy grand champion, father of 11 children.
Yep, bingo. And then,
but the part I always heard was member of the Society of St. Pius X, which is the cool Catholics.
He engaged in Holocaust denial. Did you see that? No, what actually?
Yeah, they get a lot of bad rap. They also do everything in Latin, which Jesus never spoke, but that's okay.
Well, the Hudson Gibson, the Holocaust denial was the actually census. There's a census that came out after the war that said the population of the Jews had actually increased by 250,000 or something like that. And that's what he brought up that basically got him tied. I don't think he went much further than that.
Right.
And
then there's multiple censuses.
Mel Gibson was asked that, and he's like, my father never lied to me, is basically what he said. But I mean, I personally, I think he was trying to do suicide by cop. When that whole situation when he was drunk and he got pulled over.
Yeah.
Like
that sounds. Now, what do you think of it?
I think he wanted. I think maybe the cop even had like a Jewish Star of David on him or something. And the guy, he was just like shooting.
Don't all sheriffs have a Star of David? Is that the star of the sheriff?
That's the sheriff's star. Yeah, right. The sheriff is a.
I think that is interesting, though. I mean, like my vibe on it wasn't that he was running from tax money. It was that he was a member of the Society of St. Pius X, and Society of St. Pius X is pretty wild group, right? Like they basically the way Society of St. Pius started was Marcel Lefebvre. He secretly created an order without the right of it by the Pope. And this was in order that in case the Vatican II was not Catholic enough, they'd have a backup plan. But technically, it's the way Catholicism works is like you're continuing the order, and even the Catholics admit like they basically stole the order, and they've been continuing it. So he legally could do it. So they excommunicated Lefebvre, but they couldn't stop the Society of St. Pius X. They couldn't stop the priests that are members of Society of St. Pius X. There's also, I think, the FSX or something like that, which is like there's another version of it that was created by the Pope as a contingency, just because they were so worried that the Society of St. Pius X would take over. It's like the new Jesuits, but they don't trust the Pope at all.
Then you've got the Black Israelites.
Oh yeah, the real ones.
Well, what about there was Bob Marley recently? I mean, that whole thing was Haile Selassie to the gills.
The guy in Haiti?
Yeah, Haile Selassie thought that he was like the reincarnation of Jesus.
No, it wasn't his fault.
No, they say he's like from King Solomon and Sheba.
He literally, so Haile Selassie literally is paternalistically from King Solomon and maternalistically from the Queen of Sheba. But he also had a group of pro-African Pan-Africanites that were in like the proto-Rastafarian movement in the 30s in Jamaica, and they were really strongly thinking about this idea, like we need to have a king that has like line that descends back, and that plus the religious movement, which was there was a lot of religious preaching going on in Jamaica, and it devolved into, well, I don't know, it changed from being a Eurocentric religion into what became Rastafarianism in the 30s. And then they started saying, well, actually, this guy who's the last reigning king, he's the, he's the Christ, he's the messianic character who will save Rastafarianism. By the time in the 70s, 60s and 70s that Haile Selassie heard that, he was weirded out. And he thought it was really interesting, but he didn't like believe it. And he went to Jamaica once and didn't get off the plane because he was freaked out, because everyone, he's like, wow, there's tens of thousands of people here to see me like I'm Jesus. I'm not ready for this. So he got back and he didn't get up. They just took off. But he did give a section of land to the Rastafarians in Ethiopia for them to settle. Unfortunately, then the Soviet socialist and tropical fascist African militants in Ethiopia took over Ethiopia, and it was the last African monarchy, and it was destroyed essentially and replaced with a communist one, which was probably financed by Italy, which is ironic if you know about Italy and Ethiopia.
So okay, so that's weird. Like, he's basically, are you implying that he's basically sponsored by the Catholic Church then?
Haile Selassie or whom?
No, you said that he was sponsored by Italy or whatever.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I'm saying was Haile Selassie, who was fighting against fascism, and he actually, that speech that Bob Marley sings, until the philosophy which holds one race superior to another, inferior, is finally and permanently abolished forever. That is a speech done by Haile Selassie at the United Nations, because he was one of the only ones who'd be allowed to do that, because he was a literal monarchy, and the Queen of England had to take him seriously because he was a literal, like, he was a king at the time. So,
Dang, that drip is hard.
Emperor or some shit.
Right.
He has literal peerage that goes back to Solomon, which is literally more close to Solomon than the Queen of England's, which she has to trace back to Solomon. So he was higher on the level. However, communists don't care about peerage, or nobility or ignobility. So with the socialist, fascist Italians, which in the 30s and 40s, the fascist Italians took Italy, they took the Ethiopian obelisk, they took it apart, and then they castrated it, and they brought it back to Italy. They put up the Ethiopian obelisk in Italy. They finally brought it back, I think in 2008 or something, to Ethiopia. In the process of tearing it down and putting it back up, it lost about 6 inches or something like that, which is, fallaciously metaphorical. And then they replaced the government with a Ethiopian and Eritrean radical sect, which was probably financed at some point with help of the United States, but it looks more clearly from the Club of Rome and from Italy. And so the fact that Italy was already interested in Ethiopia makes the most sense, that these socialists, and we associate fascists with the right, but really in Italy it's associated with the left, and this is why the Fiat was the base car for the Lada. Like the Italian mafia was associated with the Soviets and bringing over the car that made it possible for the Lada to produce out of a Fiat. So Italian socialists are ubiquitous with the left and also with the Club of Rome and with the Jesuits, because the Catholic Jesuit Church, their agenda is liberation theology. It's a form of socialism. Everyone will be an altar boy and own nothing, right? Haile Selassie.
I think you just shut it down.
Oh yeah, mic drop. I don't know. Well, how about follow the money for a second? I mean, the left and the right recently are becoming famous. A lot of our friends were the counterculture for a minute. It seemed super cool. And now it's like, okay, they're giving them money and they're associating with people. What do you guys think about like Turning Point and like the New Democrat movement and these things? Like, these things are becoming social media, right? It's no longer just like our friends making podcasts. It's now they're picking them up and they're using them for agendas. Do you feel that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Turning Point, from the get-go was kind of Charlie Kirk's
experience of I don't really want to go to college. I want to do something different. And now I think, he's turned it, especially the organization is a lot more militant, if you could say that, or a little bit more than, 20 something, 19-year-olds networking. Because that's what it initially was. It was just a place to network for kids who wanted to work in politics. That was something he kind of always emphasized. It was kind of like a lot of it was his vanity project of seeing how big of an influencer he could be too at one point. This was 5 years ago. Now it's something very different.
Right, but then also like Turning Point's PR is they're completely missing the mark what they initially set out to do. Mainly due to APEC. Like this whole pro-Israel front is completely destroying the PR, especially with the right. It's completely dividing the right. Is actually, with especially with what's going on, and with the war, the Palestinian war.
I think they're even kind of being red pilled. Like,
they try to be, but they're always like pro-Israel in the end. It bothers.
He merely stated, this attack from Palestine, it feels a little bit like a false flag. How the hell did they not know that there were guys coming in? There were not any 20-somethings that were supposed to be on guard duty. They left their post.
For me,
the United States military doesn't do that. And while there are a lot of talking heads, always talk about how badass the Israeli military is, and they do, there's a lot of propaganda on that. It felt normal to just question that, and then he got roasted. People started threatening him of like taking his. It was like I think it was like John McCain's daughter's husband. He just started threatening Charlie Kirk on your little cled's going to be taken away from you. It was very weird.
I'm on the fence about it because like I do understand the position of like false flag incidents that those definitely occur. As we've seen with the Nova Scotia shooting, the Canadian journalists actually did their due diligence, found out the Nova Scotia shooting in Canada was paid through the RCMP. But yeah. So but the thing is, also having a military experience, I understand the sheer incompetence of our modern military. As much as we try to propagate that, like that NATO is so strong, that we're like the United States military is impenetrable, the Iron Dome in Israel is amazing, whatever. In reality, like the complacency between each individual in the modern militaries today. Especially the fact that we're not really fighting for any causes. We're all aware to some extent that we exist to move the goalposts for some corporation.
Oh my god! And so many people that we know, and I hate to say it, but like, how many people would be willing to not say something because they would lose their platform if they said it?
Right.
More than it was 4 or 5 years, like 10 years ago. I mean, God, in 2016 to 2018, a lot of people we knew made choices. They were willing to say things, even if it shut them down. And I see the same people now saying, "Well, now that I've got this platform, I got to be careful."
Not only that, like if you've been following with like military times or whatnot, like there's been a thing going on within the U.S. military as a whole, every branch wide. There's a a movement of a silent mutiny. They're calling it, where just people within our age group are just like so apathetic to the extent they're not even doing their jobs anymore, or they're trying to find ways to dodge like work. This was especially a problem with my unit. Yeah. And, like people like just sign up for like bullshit medical appointments. So yeah, that's been happening. So like I completely believe the penetration of the Iron Dome through something low level as with like those kite things they use, those paragliders they use. Yeah, like because the Iron Dome is made for like actual hard defenses, right? Like
they have to, yeah.
Their detection system is for like missiles and planes, like shit that's just like built. They never would have accounted for something as dumb as a paraglider. right?
Well, the Palestinians, they tested that beforehand. That's not
Right,
something
right.
they've been working on this for years.
That's what I'm saying. This is definitely believable. I definitely do see some false flag elements. Sure, right? There's just always that conspiracy end of things that I'm open to, but also to the extent where like complacency, the decay that we've been seeing in NATO since Obama, and also the global apathy within every military in the world. This is definitely we're seeing like the consequences of all those symptoms accumulating up to this point because our world governments do not care about our veterans, our military at all.
Guyana Spice says, I will go to bat for you, Andreas X, but people are becoming aware. It takes time. People weren't talking about topics that all of you discussed years ago.
Right.
See, I find that's also like, okay. I mean,
ever
okay.
since COVID, dude, everyone got red pill, dude.
Okay, but like I know Will, and I know Will's been here since before anybody. Ironically, I think people, even though people are just now getting ready to know Will's been like thinking about these thoughts since forever. And I feel like it's weird to me, like when in September 11th, I downloaded a bunch of, because I used to sell CDs at school in 7th grade, so I downloaded a bunch of September 11th footage because I was like, I don't know if this will go missing. I don't know. I was 11, but I just was like, I better download this stuff and make CDs. And I give them, if you bought a CD, I would give you, here's a copy of all of the September 11th footage that I could find with it, because it just felt like it was important. And I can't imagine the world that we live in where people are so complacent, because it's so scary to think, well, then all it takes is making sure people have this new Xbox, or they have access to McDonald's through automation, or there's got to be something. Like every few years there's a little crisis that happens. I'm always hoping that it'll work. Like Occupy Wall Street, didn't you kind of hope that it was going to do something other than help open borders and Soros?
It didn't do shit.
Well,
do shit. I mean, like,
wait, Aiden, what were you saying?
Hard, man. You can think the same thing about, like you said, September 11th. You can go back further to like JFK or whatever like that. Like recently, within the last, like, I think 10 years, there's been a bunch of JFK files that have been put up on archive.org. You spend 15, 20 minutes reading that shit, and you're like, this is so obvious.
Right.
You know what I mean? We're
Brittany L is pretty, or at least looks from the little thing down there. I don't know. It's more.
I just feel like things are a lot more they're a lot more easy to read in 2020, right? Like and post, they are a bunch of there's
God
really
bless Foya, man. But Aiden, what were you saying? I know you had like a burning question or something.
Well, I did have something on Gunwoo. He was talking about the military experience he had about Israel, and I was just going to point out, I thought it was very interesting. George Bush gave the most in-depth, comment he's ever said about Israel when he was like, when Hamas came in, he's like, yeah, Israel's going to kill them all. But he said, Israel's army, well, half of their reserves are utterly worthless. They forgot how to shoot a gun. And then I think I knew what he also was implying too was most of their 20-year-olds are not really equipped for actual violent duty.
Yes.
Which is another part. True. A lot of Israeli military service is kind of like Jewish summer camp. It's like because a lot of these kids,
they're conscripted.
They're conscripted kids, but a lot of them, simply put, they grew up in weird religious organizations, and half of their untapped reserves are Hasidic Jews who can't even do a push-up. He pointed that out, he kind of pointed that out, and then I realized most of those, I'm thinking of Jappy, American Princess types that are in the Israeli. No, they're scared shitless of what's happening, and it really made me realize, the Israeli army, they are really being. They have 40 to 50,000 men, or like guys that are actual adepts, the hardcore guys.
Krav Maga. Yeah.
And that's what the whole government is dependent on.
The
And I
entirety,
thought that was very illuminating.
Well,
and you know what?
you gotta think of it a couple of ways though. On one hand, there's a real like ethnocentric look here or xenophobic, because it's like saying, okay, well, here's a group of people that have a different religious fanaticist group. I mean, hey, cults and kibbutz, they're very practical. The fact that you can raise a group of kids.
It's
the other
not
thing
a,
is the military.
It's not a race.
Military epigenetically changes you. So you've got a bunch of guys who were never in the military before, who are living in ghettos for centuries, and all of a sudden now you have access to better food, exercise, life routines, and paths. I mean, you're putting them through the ringer so that they'll become better people and their kids will become better people. I mean, already seeing the health of the average Israeli is drastically better than an Israeli's health in 1969, right?
Yeah.
Because they're completely.
No, but that's not the case. No. Well, Aiden's completely right. Aiden is completely right. It's not. But the thing is, it's not a race issue. It's not xenophobia. It's not even like back to these are Jewish people. It's everybody. Like it's just, we're seeing this globally throughout NATO. Every world government is dependent on their special forces because of the cosmopolitan lifestyle, the sedentary lifestyle that everybody under the age of 30 has been ingratiated into, has turned everybody essentially combat ineffective. This is becoming
unless you live in Palestine and a kibbutz, you're probably
this has been a growing issue with especially military recruitment. Everybody else also is, because of the internet, is socially aware to some extent that like, hey, these wars are pointless and nobody's enlisting. But like the only people that are enlisting are the bottom of the barrel people that have no other hope or opportunity besides the military. We're seeing this all throughout the United States as well. Everybody under the age of 30 or so demoralized about the world economy at large, the fact that they can't own a home or even go to college through their own means, that they have to join the military to do so. So we're seeing people that like were essentially like ideologically socialists that don't even care about America having to join the military, like the Air Force or the Navy.
That's a universal problem. That's something that's happening in every country.
That's
over
what I'm saying.
Well,
this is not a matter of xenophobia. Like he just mentioned that he just mentioning the part on the Israeli side about like
particular example.
It's being a particular example. But this is a global phenomenon. This has been mentioned in the Joe Rogan podcast, even.
But I want
to go ahead.
That would be xenophobic about that.
It's not.
Israel
There's nothing.
Has, they have a lot of different groups there, varied groups. Some of them are militant against each other. Vast majority of, I would say, a lot of the, I guess the Reform Jews and I guess some of the Orthodox Jews, those make most of the very militant population that's in the people that actually do shit in the Israeli military. But there's
actually groups of Orthodox Jews that are against the military. They won't conscript. They're called bloodsuckers.
That Hasidic group where they all have 14 kids and used to be only 1,000 people in the 1950s. Now they're about 1 million. And why, Bibi Netanyahu was constantly, they had to have 3 or 4 elections because they couldn't get him out.
He's constantly calling the Orthodox Jews. Netanyahu constantly calls the Orthodox Jews who won't conscript bloodsuckers. That's the term that they use in the Israeli media for the Orthodox.
His election coalition still allows those people not to be in the military.
Right.
And his
why would he do that?
Candidates,
it's so ironic, man.
It's so on the nose.
Well, everybody calls him. I don't think he came up with bloodsucker. That's an Israeli terminology that's been common since the 80s.
Netanyahu is as bad as messaging as Biden is.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Is that the Israeli
Netanyahu went to high school.
I'm sorry. There's like
stuff.
One at a time, gentlemen. Tiffany, did you know that Netanyahu went to the same Chicago high school as Adam Krigler?
No, I did not.
Right. Pretty weird.
They're all actors, my guy. It's the Bohemian Grove.
So there's a pressure group of the militant type people that would go in the military. They may not want to actually go because they get killed. Who are they fighting for? Bloodsuckers.
Right. That's what it says in the newspapers. That's what their newspapers are telling them. Yeah. That's a good point. That is a good point.
The liberal reformed, people, Jews that don't really have children,
they're scared shitless now.
They don't want war either. Yeah, they're more
They're
tolerant.
these are the nuclear engineer types, and they're like, oh my god.
So if you go back
my
to that,
second cousin, who is this bloodsucker, he is going to make a one-state solution. We're going to have to share everything with the Palestinians because they don't mind it. They want that, more insular life that would be provided if Palestinians had an equal foot in a one-state solution.
So let's tie this all together. Morning show host apologizes on air for calling Haredi Jews bloodsucker. TV host and model Galit Gutman will apologize on air for calling ultra-Orthodox Israeli Jews bloodsuckers. A major network says, how much burden can be placed on a third of this country in order to support all of these Haredi bloodsuckers, all these people who suck our blood?
Ironic, man.
She said Friday on Channel 12 morning news show during a panel discussion about the government's upcoming budget, drawing outrage.
Dude, isn't this all so surreal? Like the people like us have been facing so much ostracization like throughout like the past
for
20
just
years.
mentioning what's happening.
Right.
Like, hey, there's an elephant over there. How dare you talk about the elephant?
And then now it's just public discourse. Like Jesus
now the Israeli government is now acting like the Roman Praetorian Guard. It's like, oh my god, I don't want to be around these people anymore. It's like
they're complaining about their allergies.
Will is scratching his arm real quick, and we were about to pull up a link. Here you go.
I don't know, man. The thing, what we were talking about is how war has changed. I don't know if you guys seen this, which has happened in the last day or so, but Ukraine actually rammed a plane into a oil refinery within Russia proper. Do you get what I'm saying? Which means a couple of different things. It means one, that their air defense is not nearly as good. Could mean that, or it could mean that somebody went inside and then modified the plane and rammed it in. Either way, it changes war because it is like a passive aggressive way of attack. I mean, as drones, is that what we're going to get to? Is that there's just going to be homemade drone wars?
No,
is that not what's going on right now?
Also, another layer.
The guy with the soldering iron. You know what I mean?
I thought that's what we're at now. We're at the homemade cheap drone wars. It's so much easier to make a $90 or $20 drone. Okay.
Another layer to this is people are now seeing the parallels in 9/11. This whole drone theory was a thing back in 2003, man. People have been talking about how
come on, a drone in 2001 that would have cost $10,000 government dollars, buddy. I mean,
dude, these are homemade.
We would have had to have some sort of a deep state budget or something.
Raptor was missile capable then.
I don't see how
the
that
F-35 project was started in the 80s, bro. Our defense projects contracts and projects go back 20, 40 years in the development. So a lot of the stuff technology we're seeing now is
you mean that the United States government had deals with Yamaha Precision Agriculture back in the 70s? No. You mean post-Vietnam pilots were RC captains?
Bro, the WEF was purporting smart dust back in 2001. Dude, smart dust was a thing back in 2001. All the things we're seeing that's being
smart dust was a thing back in the 70s, babe. I'm just telling you.
That's well.
But it's the adequacy of our armed forces. I think the only prepared country as far as military goes would be America at this point. What this shows us about Russia is that Russia is screwed against Ukraine,
Korea,
which means that if Russia goes up against NATO, Russia's screwed. And that's kind of scary for everybody because that basically means nukes.
Well, I mean, you use your
Russia
biggest
is not.
weapon you have to.
Russia is not.
The aliens
not
won't
screwed.
let that happen.
Yeah. How about Silicon Forest, Siberia, right? Because there's the Novosibirsk Silicon Forest where all the great tech drone companies in Russia are coming from, and they're incredible. The amount of effort that's being made to make super cheap drones, to be able to repurpose other technology. And now, because they're not able to have access to the NVIDIA systems, they're building their own Spark chips that are able to process. And people don't realize this, but GPUs, while they can process a lot, aren't very fast. So if you can build a Spark chip that's dedicated to those kinds of tasks, you can have a super cheap, super efficient solution that doesn't require any sort of radio, so it can't be jammed. And yeah, you
Yeah,
can make
they
these drones in
transform,
India for 20
Yeah, but
bucks.
you're going to get really silly shit. You're going to get Taiwan beating China with drones that China made. It's
Look.
silly.
So Russia's appearing. This is a whole. This typical Sun Tzu tactic: appearing weak when you're strong. They have hypersonic missiles. They haven't broke out yet. It's not a matter of nukes at this point.
Yeah, that's true. They have a great setup.
Yeah, so they're holding back their actual cutting edge supply. They're throwing away their Soviet stockpiles. So they're
I don't
testing
even
out.
think that they would work though. Like, I think that we have a lot less to fear in the world than our imaginations give us credit for, because
but
nobody wants to fight.
But the thing is,
people that do aren't qualified.
I hate to sound pretentious, but I got buddies that volunteered for the Ukrainian Civil War in 2014, and I got analysts looking into this shit, tracking like fucking.
Yeah, the Reddit was insane back then.
But anyways, they're trying to de-escalate the situation from going into a global war, but they're also pissed that France is coming in. Their whole front is they're trying to make this a PR thing, especially we've seen with Tucker saying they're like, hey, we're not the bad guys here. So they're trying to like appear weak. They're trying to appear like we're screwed and whatnot, so that Finland can fuck off. They're trying to.
I mean, remember what was his name in Star Trek?
More than them. I mean, they can take that, but I don't think Russia's ready. Like Russia hasn't had education that has been substantial since the fall of the USSR.
In Star Trek.
In Star Trek, a lot ahead. No, they've always been ahead in terms of education. Like,
I do not agree with you, sir.
I
think Russia is inadequate as they appear, and that should scare the shit out of all of us.
Have you lived in
that'd be hard for me to believe, though, because like the idea is that we're trying to pretend the Russians are these like drunk incompetents when I know them. It doesn't work. What we end up with. We get this alternative look, which is like, how many times did we have to sabotage Russia for them to actually fail at something that's really easy to succeed at? And yeah, I hear your point, Gunwoo, because I was thinking about Star Trek. Scotty will often say, like, they're always like, wow, he was able to fix this computer, and the repairs were supposed to take 3 days. And he just says eventually, I always say it's going to take 3 days. That way, when it takes 20 minutes, everyone's impressed, right? And I think that's a big thing with Russia. Russia's trying to look like its insurmountable odds that it defeats prove that it was righteous in its battle. Because how could you win?
They're burying kids who can even have children. Like that doesn't. No, we got to understand that. Like, China isn't as powerful as they appear. In fact, China's like collapsing. Russia isn't in. The fact that Russia was trying to take Ukraine means that they weren't as powerful as we thought they were, because they felt that they were on a timetable.
No, there's a lot of history to that, though.
No, it's
the
Ukrainian war. The Ukrainian war.
Trying to say they're not part of Russia.
No, the Ukrainian war right now is a complete retaliation against Trident Juncture. So people completely neglect the events.
It's an Atlantis client state. It's a puppet state being produced by the West versus what already existed in Ukraine, which were half of Ukraine is Russian-speaking oblasts that were always Russian and are very Russian today and still are. I mean, there's not a Russia going into Ukraine. It's a Russia returning to Russians in Ukraine. As much as that sucks, as much as nobody wants to hear that, because there are still Ukrainians and Poles and Gypsies and all kinds of people in Ukraine. But there were Russians.
You're throwing bodies. Like, here's the thing: you got like you're basically saying that the Ukraine-Russia war is like a dramatization of a real shooting. You know what I mean? Like, it's a dramatization of a war. But there's bodies that Russia is throwing out that hurts them economically. Like, they're doing it for a reason. There's not like, oh, we have a whole bunch of people over here that we can just waste on this war. Because right now, like, Ukraine is beating Russia like 5-1 as far as bodies are concerned.
No.
But yes, that is true.
That's how Russia wins.
Russia can hold out for like another 5 years, losing that amount. But the fact of the matter is, everybody expected Ukraine to be gone within 2 weeks, man. Most strategists
Not with
thought
our budget.
that. We're 2 years later. And Ukraine is striking their oil refineries with little tiny $35 drones and shit. Like it's an
everything
issue.
that we're
Nobody
buying
can
for them.
win a war anymore, is what I'm getting at. We learned that.
There's no winning.
Bro.
Russia's actions are out of desperation. They're not out of strength.
No, like this, we're seeing a repeat of World War I, my God. We're seeing fucking neo-colonization of Africa with China and Russia and also the United States. We're seeing another industrial revolution. We're seeing this class warfare stuff. We're living in the interwar period of 1900s leading up to World War I. There was a stagnation in warfare. We're seeing military tactics haven't caught up to modern warfare technology, so we're stagnating in a warfare of trench warfare, literally. So we're going to essentially the next step in the progression of the Ukrainian war is going to be tunnel warfare. If Russia secures this weapons deal with North Korea and eventually actually somehow manages to get North Korean volunteers into Ukraine, they will eventually tunnel, because North Korea is known for tunneling. They have been tunneling under the DMZ since the 60s. So they're eventually going to tunnel under Kiev. That's what they're preparing for, positioning all their military strategic defenses on. It's just a matter of diplomatic, who's going to allow North Korea to be involved, because that might exacerbate the Korean War. We're all waiting for Taiwan essentially for shit to pop off. But whether or not this is going to turn into a third world war, who knows? But we're definitely seeing an Albert Pike prophecy coming out into play. But Russia is definitely not screwed. Like you said, nobody wants to fight a war anymore. But
Russia might not be screwed now. Russia's going to be screwed within the next 20 years. That's what I'm saying. The evidence of the war is the evidence that they did it out of desperation, because they don't have.
Have you been tracking what they're doing with their currency, though? That's the thing. The payout of this in the end is being massive. Right now, this is a war over lithium. The WEF needs lithium for the electric cars. There's the Silicon Valley dreams and whatnot, for the fourth industrial tech.
And for the drones, not for electric cars, for drones.
But Russia needs the lithium they're switching their currency. They're breaking out of the world central bank. They're into their own thing, which
they're going to use up the rest of their petrol for the petro ruble, and they're going to build a brick economy
under a commodity based. Under a commodity metal based economy. We're going back to the gold standard, but this is not just the gold, it's every metal that has utility, which is going to be stronger than the gold standard. This is the payout. They're looking at payouts in the hundreds and 200s in centuries, essentially.
The Russians have the same. If you've read the Panama Papers and you see how Putin and Medvedevich has put money into these shell companies all around the world, and these shell companies have no official owner. There might be a 2% ownership by a guy who's got his name on it, but the rest of it is whoever owns the stocks. And if you show up there with a briefcase with all of those stocks, then you own that company. You own 98% of the company. And this is all built by Medvedevich. But this is exactly what Mormons have done with the intellectual reserve. This is what the mafia did with building like pizza chains across the United States. There's a lot of examples of a shell company system. And yeah, Russia's got companies all over the world, right? Panama Papers infers you have Russians in Brazil, you have Russians in Africa, you have Russians in Italy. Putin has a huge Tuscany mansion villa in Italy, right? So that he has access to Western funds constantly, even if it's blocked because it's owned technically, by 2% by some guy in Italy.
Not only that, like in terms of what Russia is setting out to do economically, with the commodity-based middle system, whatever, they already won. Afghanistan is secured under BRICS. They've already won. They've already said what to do. They're like Ukraine's just an extra fuck you to NATO because of trying to juncture. The largest NATO military exercise in history that happened around the Scandinavian region as like a fuck you to Russia was it was just the whole NATO expansion shit that Putin's on about, which is why he took over Ukraine, because Ukraine, the Maidan situation, as the link that I put up in private chat, like the Ukraine situation, this war hasn't premeditated since 1947 or even prior. If we're going back to the history of the ecumenical patriarchate, but essentially this boils down to 2014 when Cambridge Analytica staged the Maidan protests through Facebook. This is even in the Vice documentary. You can see it. And Cambridge Analytica, when they were being indicted, this was all public information as well that they were involved in Ukraine. And then when they eventually, the previous president of Ukraine, his mistake was using Bekrut troops to disband the protests, which negatively impacted Ukraine's PR to the extent it exacerbated to the extent where it became a bipartisan civil war. But this is all orchestrated through BlackRock. They want to. So this is a tried and tried playbook by the U.S. Military-industrial complex since Korea essentially. They would level a country, destroy their economy, take their currency reserves when it's hyperinflated, and then they would use a company like BlackRock to restructure their economy and propagate the real estate, and then they'll sell back the currency reserves at almost equivalent to the exchange of the U.S. dollar conversion in terms of conversion rates. So this is how we fund the VA. This is how we fund a lot of military programs, and this is how this country makes money through war and propagates the petrodollar. And this is nothing new. But say people in terms of short term are panicking, like, hey, whatever. They only see like in terms of election cycles, like 4 years ahead of what's going to happen, but like they don't really see the economic puppeteering in the background, what they're actually planning on. A lot of these rich people, especially throughout the first industrial boom, industrial revolution, like you see with the Carnegie and Rockefellers, especially through the world fairs and whatnot. If you look at their financing, they lost billions of dollars initially to make trillions in the end. This is how rich people make money.
Investment.
Yes, long-term investment through diplomatic action and political puppeteering.
Yeah, girl.
Amen to that.
The water crisis. How about that? I mean, so around the world, there's like all these infrastructure problems. Johannesburg's water crisis, the latest blow to South Africa's world-class city. This has been going on for 10 years. South Africa.
That's nothing new.
Resource scarcity. This all harb do. Yeah.
Yeah, but what do you think about this? I mean, India's got a new
India's
Silicon Valley faces a water crisis that software cannot solve. I keep seeing water crisis as the new thing. And remember a few years ago, Bilderberg saying we want water to hit $100 a barrel. We want water to be more expensive than petroleum,
Water wars.
Earlier, I was talking to Tiffany, and we were remembering and reminiscing on Stanley Allen Meyer, who died in 1998, who created the perpetual motion machine water fuel cell car, right? Which is a pretty cool idea. But what do you think about like water technology? I mean, aren't we moving towards a free energy system where everything's built on water? And isn't the world 78% water? What's going on? What do you guys think about all this water?
I was just researching this. Apparently, Honda, a bunch of Japanese car companies are finally working on the hydrogen engine. And then there's all this new stuff that I just learned. And so them getting ahead of the game to try to make water expensive and precious and head off this water-powered car.
No. It's the new oil. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, right? Well, once they've taken all your fats, then they have to take the actual moisture from the dust in your corpse. That's the next thing. But,
I know what they're doing.
Thankfully, milk is still cheaper than gas. So.
Remember how I mentioned the Saudis? Remember how I mentioned the Saudis switching to bricks? We were trying to move away from the petrodollar. There's the whole trade war stuff. This is what ever since the disbandment of NAFTA, this is what's been going on. With like the Las Vegas shootings, with how the Saudi prince died within the time period, like all this stuff is linked. Ross Adam Hillary connection, yeah, like the stuff was like the Ukrainian war is just a boiling point of all the consequences of the Obama era diplomacy. Like Hunter Biden, like his laptop stuff is all linked to this war and whatnot. And yeah, but the Biden specifically was tasked of restructuring the whatever the shell companies and all the corruption stuff that they were dealing with then. It's honestly this is all a matter of remembering what happened like 10 years ago. But it's just the issue is we're so exacerbated by all these news cycles and like all these side distractions that the American attention span is only 4 years long.
Yeah, that's why we're ripe for another school shootings this election
Right,
year.
exactly, bro.
Oh,
Somebody
well,
told
we
me
just had the child
"Yo,
killer in
you know what the
Helsinki, right?
United States needs is a good old fashioned presidential assassination. We always had the best, right?
You know what
We've
the
had
first
the
one
best
is, right?
presidential assassinations.
You
We're
know,
due for another.
We'll never outdo the very first presidential candidate assassination, right? You know, the very
Which
first
one?
candidate to be assassinated trying to run for president? Joseph
Who?
Smith.
Right.
Yeah,
Of course.
the very first.
Circle.
Yeah, full circle.
Brilliant.
I don't know. The water thing is interesting to me. I don't know if anyone has thoughts. Kurt, you were in Argentina. I forget if they have fascist fountains. Do they have free water everywhere? That's what they call it in Spain. You have Franco fountains. You use Franco is different than fascist phalangist fountains, but they're the state put in free water for everybody. Is that in Argentina?
No, it's pretty much you have to go into a business, and like it's also got that weird thing going on like in Italy where if you go to a restaurant they like don't serve you like any free water like ever. It's like you always have to order the bottled water
Because fascist Italy, you have to go out in the street
But
like everyone else and get it from the
That's why
fountain.
Rome is not a part of Italy. They got those free water fountains that have the best water in the world. So
Yeah.
they've been there for thousands of years, apparently.
I feel like this is an interesting point. Like free water and the ubiquitousness of water made Rome, made civilization, and the idea of restriction of water is the future. We're talking about restriction of carbon, restriction of water. It's the opposite. It's the thing that's going to slow down growth, right? Because if people have to be careful how much water they consume, or wash, or
12
Mel
inches
Gibson,
of water
Mad Max.
on
Tiff,
my
you
lawn.
and you, the lovely lady in the top.
I've heard, you hear different people justifying different things. The Engineer Guild of the United States government did come into Colorado in the 20s and 30s. And so that's why Colorado still has reserves of water, and indeed why we can support Arizona, California, parts of Nevada. It's because we have these aqueducts and actual engineering to keep our water flow, like from the mountain streams and the mountain snowmelt, organized, pooled, and not evaporated. So that's why Colorado can support it and other states. But the water court just ruled that California and Arizona, they just had to get cut off. And so there are entire developments near Phoenix and probably other cities too. And then obviously the farmers in California are going to be in trouble. What?
You're forgetting Mexico. By the time like the water gets down to Mexico, there's nothing left because it's all absorbed by the US.
I find it really interesting that one judge there's only one judge that resides over all the water disputes in the country. And he's out of Sacramento.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like the most liberal part of it too. And it's like
that's who gets the most of Colorado's water goes to California.
Yes, and they continue to build here. So in terms of controlling people's water, it's like even buying a house in Colorado, we're well aware of this. We may be buying a lemon. People may be buying a lemon. Wells that get dug underneath for the stupid new developments in the
in Oregon, didn't they recently like make where you can't, they cut off people from being able to use their well water? Did you guys hear about that?
I know that they're trying to let people not use their gardens, and maybe that's how they're controlling it, is the water.
But they acted like it was out of concern, like because of runoff and because of this, like it was like
that. They frame it, the YouTube clickbait frames it as you can't garden anymore, but it actually being about them controlling water makes a lot of sense.
South Park did an episode about this, and it was allegedly about the streaming wars. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh gosh.
That
was really good. Yeah, I think the water thing. Go ahead.
And also, like to tie this all together in terms of we're mentioning geopolitical warfare. Like, so warfare has progressed to the extent where it's no longer about conventional warfare. Conventional warfare we're seeing in Ukraine is just a show where they're testing out weapons. Essentially, it's for SOFIX.
It will change everything.
But right now we're seeing conventional warfare as a side piece being used as an overall trade war. That's what we're going through. Because BRICS is pulling apart from they're isolating themselves from the Central World Bank, essentially creating a state bank. China is creating a state bank, and Russia's creating a state bank as well. And that's the thing. Like every war that we've seen throughout history has always been about state banking, from the U.S. Civil War to World War I to whatever. Every time you create a state bank, you get invaded by like NATO or whatever central bank Rothschild forces or if it's being sponsored. That's just a repeating pattern. It's nothing new. But like the new part is we're seeing a trade warfare to a scale that we've never seen before. Like we're saying like we're now monetization, we're restricting water now. Like what the fuck? That's never been that's unprecedented.
We're not shipping like we used to. There's
The
no
most
more
abundant
more
resource.
US guarding of global trade routes. There's none of that anymore. There's and nobody else can. We've been lucky up to this point that we haven't seen a resurgence in piracy, really, because within the next 20 years, we're probably going to see that.
You think we're not seeing a resurgence in piracy? Piracy is huge.
Well, yeah, online piracy.
I mean, it's not like every.
No, that's not what I meant. Even I'm literally just being like in like.
The Somali pirates. Yeah.
Our heroes, the freedom fighters. You know, the guys are trying to like keep self-determination in their state.
No, but
like,
the Houthi shit was a false flag. That I can say for sure. Like we're taught to believe somehow Somali pirates have like, access to like missiles or something. Like the.
I mean, if you're a pirate and you're able to get stuff, then yeah, you have access to whatever you get. But yeah, I get the feeling they're definitely hired. There's no question. I think
just like we see. Just like we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline explosion, they're using Houthis as like as a cover to hey they blew up this shit.
Well, taking a cue from them and gathering going after resources like a pirate seems to be our best strategy.
It's hard not to be like defensive of the idea, because even though I hear you that we're like manipulating it, that's the problem. Is the state itself is in between two manipulative states, and they're saying, hey, if you're going to pass through here, don't just exploit us. And the amount of nuclear waste that was dropped off in Somalia, like by Ukraine and by the West, we use Somalia as a dumping ground. Actually, there's other places too where that they've allied, because they're like, wow, you're just dumping your nuclear waste here and saying it's not going to be half-life for 500,000 years, so we can't go into that part of the desert anymore, and this is all stuff happening in the 90s. So I mean, there's a lot to be said where we're like, oh yeah, the Somali pirates, like I would defend them, but the problem then is, of course, who's hiring them, and if someone can give them money. Right. But now Somali pirates are pretty expensive to hire because they have all that stuff, whether they got it by liberating
they spend it all.
They spend it all on crack. They spend it all on crack.
The point is that it's like James Bond. Cars. In James Bond, you had 100 years ago technology that was what we have now. And in new James Bond, you have technology that is what we have now. We've lost that leap where the elite had 100 years ahead of us technology, right? And what we have instead now, like any cartel, any Somali pirate can have drones and have GPS.
But like how history repeats itself, we're going to see a resurgence of the Barbary pirate wars. That's going to be the
pirates.
So like as like how this trade war is progressing, we're seeing the Sinaloa cartel spicing up, obviously, and then like also all these gang warfares and tribalism we're seeing of like especially with Haiti popping up. 31 nations under BlackRock or under the World Bank IMF are suspected to collapse. Sri Lanka was the first. Next thing, Mexico might be like somewhere there, but we definitely see Argentina collapse and Venezuela, whatnot. But yeah, we're gonna see piracy resurge, like Meta said, but it's gonna be in terms of the Barbary Wars, like we've seen, and
I hope so.
And to combat that, just like how we did back in the 1700s, the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, was formed to combat the Barbary pirates. And so we're going to see probably a new task force of military being formed to address all these geopolitical cartels or whatever being formed. So because the global war on terror is essentially ending, we need a new boogeyman, and the new boogeyman is gang warfare. So yeah, and also, this is the ATF's essentially their last card because they're being persecuted under they lost the drug war. The amount of money and like the social political consequences of the drug war has essentially decimated America to some extent. So they're trying to bring back the relevancy again by essentially staging cartels and all this other stuff through the DEA, FBI. Essentially, we're creating a new ISIS. And then yeah, that's going to be the Sinaloa and whatnot. And how I know this is I have a buddy that's somehow friends with El Chapo's nephew.
Inside.
CIA. Gumwoo is CIA.
I am not.
Guys,
I'm just autistic,
many.
bro.
No,
I'm just autistic, bro.
I'm not bragging like 4 times already. Like there's been at least a couple of.
I don't know what Will's talking about. Anyway,
like, we're out of control at this point.
Bro, like I just be meeting people. I don't know how.
A spade, bro. A spade is a spade.
I mean, if anyone's a Fed, it's Andreas. But
I just been Forrest Gumping my entire life, and I just been meeting fucking people. My God,
Everybody
I don't
go
know
back
how
to
I
sleep.
do it.
That's right. How about this one? I'm the only one who can quit.
Oh, I need to show you the John Oliver.
What do you say?
The John Oliver thing I made a few months ago.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, hold on, Aiden. What's your Aiden Orfield AI videos? No, that's a good point. You know what? We're gonna take a second
I
here,
thought that was a good stopping point.
guys. Aiden make really cool AI videos. I always like to think that I'm making pretty cool AI. Which one do you want? The John Oliver one or?
The first one is kind of funnier, but they're both really good. They're the first 2 new ones with
The
Taylor
Vosh
Swift.
one, John Oliver's Worst Nightmare?
Yeah.
All right, let's do that.
It has sound on it.
But yeah, you guys know who Nardwar is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially like what I am for conspiracies. I just be asking questions and meeting people, and they be like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know. I just get perceived as hardness. So these people just tell me shit. God damn it. My vape is dead.
This is so real. This is what he goes through every day.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Aiden, I get you, bro. I do.
Yeah, this is like something like different. Like I live nearby, thought it was funny. So
I feel like if you work in Hollywood and you live with these people, you know this is true.
So real. Facts, bro.
Everywhere I go, I see him. I see his face. I see his face in every child, every man, woman, and child. It's so real. It's so freaking real. Ugh.
And then the other one was John Oliver seeing Taylor Swift have kids with Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which I couldn't find really good music for.
Oh, there's no music yet? Okay.
Well, it was just like
Am I not hearing it? Am I doing something wrong?
well, no, there's no music.
Okay. But I see where you're going with this, and he's just constantly thinking about it. Yeah.
I hate
He's like,
AI
this is what I
so
want.
much.
This is my dream. Wait, no, that's not what I. No. Hey, the world's going this way. Don't go
Oh
that
my
way,
God.
world. Yeah, world, no. No, world, no.
I hate AI so much.
Often when children don't, I know children that are afraid of watching commercials, and I'll just mute them and I'll do the lip syncing over them, and they love that.
They had children. They had babies that looked like them.
Yeah, that was like
that all looked like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. Let's do one more. Let's do the Travis Kelce.
What is this?
He's cultured. uses next. There's another world where like Aiden is working for CNN too, you know, and they're like, we can use him for evil instead of good. We could take this. This is fine. We could use this. This people will watch it. I'm looking forward to that world. We're realizing that way. It's nice.
But that's like interesting now is you'll begin probably in a year from now, you'll begin to see a lot of really cheap guys just make these, you know, what would normally cost at least $1 million to make. They make very cheaply with only a few, you know, cameras, that type of thing.
Jaden Smith.
There's music on that one. There's actual views, but like that came out of the idea of if there was going to be a Cleopatra movie.
For 300 years, we followed the legacy of Ptolemy and Alexander the Great. My father willed that I would share my role with Cleopatra as husband and wife. We are the last of the Ptolemies.
So
Wait,
what?
This is Dune.
Cleopatra.
Yeah.
She does not see me as her husband. I do the work.
Dude, do you remember Jaden Smith's philosophy face?
Cleopatra, she is my everything. She is my eternal, everlasting love.
Hold on, Andrew.
My love.
Pause this.
But my love isn't reciprocated. Cleopatra, for I will always love her, always and forever, no matter the witches she conspires with, or the eunuchs she dances and marches with, or the queer black rituals she partakes in. She is still my wife.
Yo, this is so
going on.
This is straight up Netflix. It's gonna be big.
Places she goes to.
Andrew, pauses. Yeah, hey, like this is so perfect because like, Aiden, do you remember Jaden Smith's philosophy face on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it works so well, bro. It's like that woke shit that like.
Well, it's like he's like, you know, come on, like everyone's like la 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 la. It's like, oh, has anybody talked about world events?
Right.
I almost got that in there, but I couldn't.
This is perfect, bro. Holy shit.
Guess who the eunuchs are, though?
Then she does befuddles me.
Who?
It's about now.
Instead of being a pharaoh, all she is just that hoe over there. Even the migrants grin at me. They laugh at my face. I'm the clown.
Tomley, you would be a fool not to know. Stop playing games with them. Jealous Jonathan and I. You shouldn't be treasonous to our Ptolemy. Be real with them. Be real with them, brother. Some scorpions in your bussy.
I proclaim I'm her husband, but all I get are giggles. I try to make her submit, but she pushes me away.
There's a whole lot of desert tracks on the desert dune. As you know, my whole flower has been cut, sadly. But those high-noted Greek boys and those little muscled Libyans, they still have the stem. I want to make babies with her. Multiply the world. She'll just poison you with that witch of hers. Stop being blind to the rat and the missing food. Tumuli, this is going to kill you. Get away from her. Someone doesn't love Libyan love poems on a magic carpet. Stop filling him with some thoughts.
Was there anything I could have done? Should I have worn more makeup and perfume?
I think we watched enough, man.
If I just got her pregnant, then she wouldn't be with those guys.
She's going to get knocked up by some Roman legionnaire and claim it's yours.
This is such a mystery. I can't get her out of my head. People say I must be blind and deaf.
Dude.
You know you guys are going to hell, right?
Probably.
mean,
What I visualize though, the thing is like within the year, you know, and probably right now, like shows you watch on TV, this is how they're going to be written. They're going to have a preliminary AI done with the guy given like the narration is like,
Oh
this
yeah,
kinda
storyboarding.
happens.
Yeah.
there's
Yeah, that was the
contract
first
against
thing I
that,
thought
though,
was going
right?
to happen.
I
Yeah,
mean,
this thing is
that's
gonna
what's
be
eventually going to happen. But right now, that's what the strikes are dealing with, right? When the strikes for the writers came back, there's a limitation that they can't even use AI for any part of it.
Yeah, but then all
They
you gotta
can't
do is
e
not
they
use
can't
writers.
even
And so you
plot
look
or
at Curb Your
outline without
Enthusiasm.
AI.
Curb Your Enthusiasm is a perfect example of a show that has no writers. You just stop being a writer. You're not part of the Writers Guild. You don't pay the Writers Guild anymore. That's fine. That's what's coming. You're gonna have shows, reality shows that
Sure.
don't have writers. They
Sure.
have whatever they are instead.
Well, that's actually something they did have. That's why reality TV got so big at the time, was that you just had all you had to do was find people that
Y'all
knew
remember the
improv
other writer's
to
strike?
do-
Anybody else remember the Joss Whedon writer's strike? Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. But I mean, that was like written into their contracts after the strike. This one was like
Sure.
particularly long. We're probably
That was
going
a
to
really
go
bad
through
one.
another one
The
next.
Joss Whedon the reason why we had the strike was because when the internet writer strike in 2008 or 10 happened, YouTube was starting, and there was all of these YouTube shows like, you know, what in the butt, and like, you know, Chocolate Rain. You know, there's a South Park about that as well. They didn't have proper money to pay those things, and they set it up that like, okay, well, we'll give you better royalties for things on television, which is what they wanted, but we're not going to give you royalties for things on the internet. And that's where the conversations departed. So it had been up until this strike that television writers weren't getting royalties from the on-demand entertainment, and now everything is on demand. That's why the strike was such a big deal. Not even because of the AI thing, but people were saying, hey, that's the next big issue, we should make it part of the strike. But they're like, we're not even here to discuss that.
Well, and there was a good point about this strike, was that you got Disney, they would not compensate Scarlett Johansson with like an extra $1 million because they just put it on their streaming platform instead of putting it in the movies. Like they just didn't even want to do that. So they, you know, she wanted her extra $20 million, I guess, or something like that. But that, you know, killed a lot of things. But these
Well, I mean,
actual,
it goes
I
beyond
showed
movies. There's the
when
whole
the
thing with
strikes
De
happened.
La Soul. I mean, De La Soul was out of streaming for years because they had like 80 samples per album, and their contract only was regulated towards cassettes and albums and stuff. It wasn't associated with streaming. But that's because it's like all new technology and we're not familiar with it and so forth and so on. But that's going to happen so fast now. Like we've got less than a year before we actually see a good film. Have you seen the Airhead biker video for AI? Have you heard about this? We're there already. We're there. You can create a film. What you just showed, Aiden, is that how you say your name?
Yeah.
Orfield?
Mhm.
Orfield?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, what you just showed was better than South Park. You know what I mean? It probably took you as much time to make that as it took to make a South Park episode. And yet it probably, I mean, it's better. It took you less work and it's better. What they were using was like construction paper and shit.
Well,
You know
I
what
told
mean?
the few of the film guys in the Texas region I live, it only took me about like 20 to 30 hours once I got the idea of it going. They're like, what the? They're like, what the fuck? They're like, what? And I just showed them how, you know, it went, and they were flabbergasted. They were like, what? Like, I got a lot of different, you know, I got a lot of like phone numbers just from one night, you know, just like of people wanting to know a little bit more about
I
it.
feel like it's gonna be really hard for media that takes a year or 3 years to exist anymore. It's going to be, if you can't make something in a week, it's going to be like everything is so
You can't make it
instantaneous.
quick.
or else.
Right. So the social phenomenon that I'm noticing right now and that I'm also excited for is so the current bread and circuses that we have is failing. That's what we're seeing. Due to the ESG score and all the shit that BlackRock tried to do, trying to make everything diversified or whatever, people are largely stepping away from the mediums that kept them distracted like video games. We're seeing, especially within the Gen Z population, less and less people staying on their computers, living that sedentary life. They're going out, becoming the Sigma male grind set, whatever. And also the social awareness and awakening that we've seen post COVID, on top of the Palestine situation. Everyone, like, people, the upper echelon are all freaking out because the lower populace is now waking up against their interests. So we're seeing now a rampant resurgence of better movies, and BlackRock is now reassessing their ESG score. They've largely rescinded it. They're letting people have creative freedoms again. They're now inputting like IP rights for more rights for the creative individual, stuff like that. They're getting desperate, but also through this we might see a renaissance of film, arts, etc. But also, but the malicious intent is to keep us distracted.
Well, there is definitely a malicious extent. Like, it's really easy to make fake sex videos now. That's a huge problem.
OnlyFans, yeah.
That's a huge solution. That's just going to end, human pornography. Like all other labor, right? Like all labor needs to be replaced with automation. So
yeah, I mean, just the idea of all
except for Andrew's. I like Andrew's labor. We're near the end here. Kurt, do you have any thoughts on all this? I wanted to hear from you. I love you, Kurt.
You're muted. Fuck.
Yeah, that's part of his dramatic pause. He's going to unmute himself as he picks up the mic. See? Watch this.
Sorry, that last comment didn't pick up on very much. So sorry about that. I'm just I'm in a similar mood as this girl here.
Wonderful.
Anything to say though?
Do I have anything to say in general?
Yeah.
No, I feel like I'm on a good silent streak here, so I want to keep that going.
All right. Well, let me pull up your link anyway. I'll go to American Time Machine's music, which we will hopefully hear from you more. I'm sorry, it was a little crowded, but it was a lot of fun. This is one of those. This felt like HLN or CNN. They used to do this thing where we had all of our heads in this little box, and everyone's yelling as quickly as possible. It's brutal, but I like it. But American Time Machine's where you can get some pretty good sympathy. Literally, check this music out. It's amazing. Some good stuff here. And The Victor, I Ain't Jesus, bled. The last message I got from Kurt was maybe I need to just take music apart more. It has to unravel into spiral into noise. Maybe that's the only place for music to go. And I like that because he's constantly taking music as far as he can.
Thanks.
I love it, Kurt. Another man who makes music. If you go to Andrew Vega, and this is his beautiful wife, and his, he's got a nice shirt, and he does these great tall bikes. This is his kid. His kid's amazing. His kid's gonna change the world. People keep rooting for Barron Trump. I'm rooting for little Vega, right? I want them. But and there's more Vegas on the way, which just makes me stoked. So everybody,
congrats, Vegas.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude, the mountainous Vegas. But if you go to his link here with the Unite, buy cool stuff because he makes awesome stuff. He does bikes, he does leather works. I've known this guy for years, and he's a jack of all trades and a master. It's pretty sweet. But he's making music, and he made music years ago. One of the first time I met him, we were at Santa Monica Community College, and we were talking about we have to start a Filipino pop band, that's a boy band. And he's like, all right, I'm down.
For the Philippines.
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to pick your demographic and you got to go with it. Also, the Philippines are great. And I had a lot of Filipino roommates at the time, and I realized, I love it.
Hell yeah, dude. The food's amazing.
Donut, his album, Hurts Donut, Pink Salt Lamp, Awesome Possum, Lost and Found, Feast or Famine. This is a solid listen, and I want you guys to check it out. This is a new normal, come out right before the COVID hit everybody. Seriously, look at this. He made this, and then COVID hit. So y'all want to hear this one? Feast or Famine, Hurts Donut. It's like prophet. It's prophetic, really. I like that.
Yeah, Hurts Donut's the one. It's
Hurts Donut. Also, Julia Common, who we will do another show in a bit. It sounds like with Gunwoo, and maybe Tiffany will be there, and that could be fun.
Whoa! That's a long list of accolades right there.
Dude, she does a lot of really important stuff. Actually, Meta, you should just do a one-on-one at some point and interview Julia about the stuff she does. We did a Vice special where she was the remote viewer to help us actually find the hollow earth entrances in volcanoes, which led to super forest fires that kept us out of regions, and they had to fly us into other states just so we could find entrances. It was freaking crazy. Good job, Julia.
Julia, how good at remote viewing are you?
I'm
The
pretty
best.
accurate. Yeah.
She's pretty exactly. She's pretty based, all around based. There was an article I really want to get into with you later. There's a reason why they're called gut feelings, and that'll be our jumping off point, I think, to come. Meta Egg, William, Morgan, he makes really good videos. I like the only videos I like are things like Meta Egg. I mean, people keep asking like, who are your YouTubers and stuff that you actually watch? And dude, you know them. Like these are the people. Like this guy is doing some really great content, especially if you're like interested in pop culture stuff. He does, I'll admit, a better job analyzing pop culture than I'm doing. So it's another reason we want to keep Will
Get him
around.
on Think Tank.
Yeah, well, we do sometimes. He's a stand-up. He doesn't sit down unless he has to. He's got that set. Like he's only doing this. He's got a room he can just stand up and run around in. Beautiful, beautiful man.
I've done it.
Yeah. We'll talk about Koresh Teed and the Babylon Barbie.
But well, I mean, I also did a lot of work for the Sync book. Well, it's funny because I actually interviewed McMonagle's wife on 42 Minutes. The like 001.
God damn.
The remote viewer, Joseph McMonagle, and the Monroe Institute on 42 Minutes. For about 5 years, we interviewed all kinds of scientists and actors.
Holy shit.
All kinds of shit. Yeah.
I feel like I'm the unofficial bastard stepchild of the Sync book somehow. I don't know how it happened, but I do love the Sync book.
That is authentic.
But there's some really good stuff here too. It's true. You guys should all check out What Is Sync. Listen to the podcast. We had
making a resurgence too. There's a lot of there was a
William John was on yesterday. He does always record, and it's one of the greatest.
Is always
ever
record.
existed. Yeah, it's incredible stuff. So I really want to promote that.
And most of those guys, including David Plate and everybody, most of the Sync book guys are way into what Andreas does and are regulars on these shows. So.
Yeah, you caught us. And then make sure you go to Aiden Orfield's AI music videos and actual AI videos because, oh my God, Fuentes and Pearly Davis. There's a lot more stuff that he does here. And I think we're going to have to collaborate on some. We're going to do some AI cooks.
This is so uncanny. God.
Wait, there's also Catboy Cammy in it and Indigo White.
Oh, Catboy Cammy, hell yeah.
And also, I own UncannyValley.ai, so we're going to have to do something with that. That seems like the plan. All right, everybody. Did I miss anything? Did I cover you all?
I'm so glad you know about Catboy Cammy, Aiden.
Well, like the idea of him just like having different movies of him and Indigo White, him like grooming Indigo White into bad situations. So I've like, the movie Lolita, I have him and Indigo White in it. And I had this scene with Sam Hyde being the police officer, like
Officer Maggot.
I'm dead.